Milan is located in northern Italy, and at one point was known globally as the epicenter of fashion and design. But the glam and glitter that is often center stage in the city hides a seedy underbelly that threatens to bubble up into violence. And so, starting in the winter of 1998, it began to do just that. It was a cold Saturday night in January 1998 when 16-year-old Fabio Tollis and his girlfriend, 19-year-old Chiara Marino, decided to head down to the midnight pub in the city's center. The club was the hub for the heavy metal music scene within the city. Fabio's father, Michele, didn't want him to go and specifically instructed him not to. But Fabio couldn't be contained. His friend's band was playing that night, and he wouldn't miss it for the world. So he snuck out of the house and met his girlfriend along the way, and together they headed to the pub. The band playing that night was the Beasts of Satan, and Fabio and Chiara knew them well. Fabio had played bass in the band a few times and was friends with the singer, Andrea Volpe. The young couple were spotted leaving the club that night shortly after the show ended, but then they would never be seen again. Police wrote off their disappearances. They claimed the two lovers had absconded to Spain and were living there, though Spanish authorities searched for the youths but could not find them. Friends and family of Fabio and Chiara knew something else had to have happened to them. Something evil, something diabolical. And they were right. Because for 6 years, from 1998 to 2004, there would be a series of suspicious deaths and disappearances of 18 young men and women throughout the region. Authorities seemed ambivalent. They ruled most of them as suicides and some of them as runaways. But Fabio's father knew differently, and he single-handedly led an investigation into the deaths and uncovered a murder cult at the heart of Milan's music scene. In recent years, news media has begun to reevaluate and deconstruct the Satanic Panic, a bout of mass hysteria that afflicted the United States for over a decade. But what if it wasn't just hysteria? What if some of it was true? Ritual Rewind brings you into the darkest corners of the 1980s, uncovering the crimes, conspiracies, and occult fears that shaped the generation. Tonight we rewind it back to 1998 and dive into the serial murders of the death metal band Beasts of Satan and the 18 gruesome murders attributed to them. It's the case of the devil and the death metal murders, and I'm your host, Drew, and you're listening to The Ritual Rewind. The Beasts of Satan was a death metal band formed in the mid-1990s in Milan, Italy, by 22-year-old Andrea Volpe, with his friends Nicola Sapone, Paolo Leoni, Mario Macchioni, Pietro Guerriero, Marco Zambolio, and Eros Montessori. The group was devoted to more than just music. It was devoted to Satan himself. One of their favorite artists, an American death metal band whose lead singer, Glenn Benton, a self-proclaimed Satanist, has an inverted cross branded upon his forehead. Benton sang about the occult, with his most popular song being Kill the Christians. The lyrics go as follows.
Armies of darkness unite. Destroy their temples and churches with fire. Where in this world will you hide? Sentenced to death, the anointment of Christ.
The Beasts of Satan participated in what, at the time, was called acid Satanism. Acid Satanism refers to the cult-like groups that blend devil worship with heavy drug use. Common in the 1980s, these groups were characterized by erratic behavior, violence, and drug-fueled rituals rather than organized theological doctrine. The Beasts of Satan would gather at Parco Sempione under the shadow of a medieval structure known as the Savora's Castle. There they would consume drugs and perform satanic rituals, attracting the disaffected youth in the area. On certain nights beneath a full moon, Andrea would induct new members into the group by forcing them to perform in violent ceremonies. They called these new members adepts. Adepts are people that have gained deep knowledge in matters of the occult. These adepts would run an exhaustive course through Parco Sempione, and then, once they had finished, they would throw themselves against the stone walls of the castle and into the thorny bushes that populated the park. They did this without complaint, because if they uttered a single grievance, they would be expelled from the group forever and never allowed to join again. And for these troubled youths, acceptance was all that mattered. And once these adepts had worn themselves down and beaten themselves up, Andrea offered them a bronze chalice from which to drink. It was a cocktail of alcohol and drugs, mainly LSD. It was an odd sight to anyone that might have seen them as they passed through the park, but it was the group's version of a black mass. One of the group's members, Mario Macchione, acted as the group's medium. He would recite Bible passages backwards. When we were doing the seances, a bronze glass was turning between us. We would fill it with pure alcohol and put mescaline and LSD in it. And he claimed that Andrea was able to cast a spell on the individuals of the group. He was very skilled in manipulating the wills of his young friends and making them do absurd things, such as acts of courage or murder. On the night that Chiara and Fabio went missing, they had spent the evening at the pub, drinking and ingesting psychedelics. At the end of the night, they left the pub with Andrea and the other members of the Beast of Satan and drove to the woods outside of Somma Lombardo. Somma Lombardo is a small town 10 minutes outside of Milan and is filled with dark, medieval architecture that gives it an ominous, brooding feeling. The area was familiar to Andrea because he had grown up here, and he led the group deep into the woods to a hole that had already been dug. There, Andrea, Fabio, Chiara, and the others continued to party, consuming even more drugs and alcohol. No one questioned why the hole was there, because other than Fabio and Chiara, they had dug it. Andrea had decided that Chiara was to be murdered, a ritual sacrifice to Satan. To some, they say Andrea wanted to do this because Chiara looked to him like the Virgin Mary. And what could be more blasphemous than the murder of Christ's own mother? The attack happened so fast that Fabio was caught off guard when Andrea stabbed Chiara directly through the heart. And when Fabio did try to intervene, he was clubbed with a hammer wielded by Mario, and then he was beaten to a bloody pulp. As Fabio and Chiara lay in the dirt, Nicola stuffed leaves into their mouths. She then dipped her cigarette in their blood and smoked it. Andrea ordered Fabio and Chiara tossed into the hole, and then Nicola pissed on their bodies and proclaimed,
"Now you're both zombies. Try and get out of this hole, if you dare."
Andrea wrote in his diary of this incident,
"We are wicked individuals. We plague the people, and we play with their lives. We know no pity. We will eliminate and cleanse, donating the ashes of our enemies to He who sits on the throne."
Mario would say this of the incident and those that would follow.
"I remember almost nothing. We took drugs of all kinds, and then a thick fog started. I don't know what I did on those occasions in Somma Lombardo, but I do remember taking a stab on my wrist from Andrea and Nicola and the two victims that night. I began to distance myself from them. I was afraid that they would kill me. They instilled in me terror. It was a weird, cruel game."
Fabio and Chiara would lie there undiscovered for 6 years, and during that time, Andreas's bloodlust would grow exponentially. It began again with 27-year-old Andrea Bontata. He was a drummer for the Beast of Satan, and his murder was punishment for abandonment. He had helped dig the hole in Somma Lombardo, but on the night of the murders, he refused to attend. Andrea turned the group against Bontata. They tortured him physically and psychologically. It caused Bontata so much anguish that in September 1998, he committed suicide by driving his car into a stone wall that killed him instantly. Mario claimed they forced him to die. They gave him the ultimatum:
"Either you do it, or we do it for you."
Then there was Stefano Langone. He was 18 when he was riding his bike home and was struck by a truck in a vicious hit and run. There was 21-year-old Andrea Ballerin, a close friend of Nicola. who was found hanged in the stairwell of his university in May of 1999. It was ruled a suicide by authorities, but Mario claimed
They stunned him with ether, then hanged him.
there was also Angelo Lombardo, a 28-year-old college student and caretaker of the local cemetery. His charred remains were found in the cemetery in December of 1999. Then a year later, there was 26-year-old Durano Mola. He was also found hanged. There was Lucas Colombo, a florist. Then there was Alexander, a 14-year-old boy and a friend of Mario's, who was found hanged by his bike chain. A rag soaked in chloroform was discovered near his body. Authorities also ruled his death a suicide. And again, there was 18-year-old carpenter Alberto Scaramuzino, who was found burned to death in his car. There were more murders. Mario was sure of it, but those were the only ones that he could remember, because most were done in a drug-induced haze. According to him, the Beast of Satan was a serial killer cooperative, because when summoning the devil, they were convinced that he helped them. They killed, and no one was discovered. They buried the bodies, and they were never found. They were crossing railroads, challenging trains to hit them, and they never did. But the killings took their toll on Mario, and he devised a plan of escape. He would leap from a bridge over the Ada River and end his own life. But that wasn't what happened. Instead, he plummeted 30 meters into the water and hit the rocks below. He could feel the sludge of the river grab hold of him, but it wouldn't let him die. Eventually, his body's natural survival instincts kicked in, and he escaped to the surface, only to rejoin the Beast of Satan on the banks of the river. But it was a murder that happened 6 years and 1 week to the day of Fabio and Chiara's demise that their cultic crimes would finally come to an end. On January 24, 2004, Andrea and his girlfriend Elisabetta, sister to the murdered Andrea Ballerin, murdered Marie Angela Pezzotta, Andrea's ex-girlfriend. On that day, Andrea called Maria Angela and asked her to meet him at Gola Secca, a secluded park in the Lombardy region of Italy. It was his birthday, and he wanted to celebrate with her. But when Maria Angela arrived, Elisabetta pulled out a rifle and shot her in the throat. But Maria Angela didn't die, at least not right away. She lay on the ground, writhing in pain. Andrea called Nicola and begged for her help, and she obliged. Together, the three of them moved Maria Angela to Elisabetta's parents' home and buried her inside the greenhouse. She was still alive as they began shoveling dirt on her. But if it wasn't for some kind of divine intervention, or possibly it was just their drug-induced stupidity, their crimes may still be hidden today. Maria Angela had driven to meet them at the park, and now her car was parked in Elisabetta's parents' driveway. They had to get rid of the car, so Andrea ordered Elisabetta to drive Maria Angela's car, and he would follow behind her. They intended to dump the car into the river and be done with it, but Elisabetta was intoxicated, and instead she crashed Maria Angela's car into a tree at a high velocity. They were arrested by police for driving under the influence, and both soon confessed to the murder of Maria Angela. Police rushed to the greenhouse, but by the time they were able to exhume Maria Angela's body, she was already dead. As the police continued to question Andrea and Elisabetta on why they would commit such a horrible crime, Elisabetta stated this: Maria Angela had grown concerned about Andrea after their breakup. She worried that she would be the next one in a long line of victims that has succumbed to the hands of the beast of Satan. So Maria Angela intended to go to the police, and Andrea wouldn't allow that. Why Maria Angela would then go to celebrate Andrea's birthday with him would be anyone's guess. While searching the woods around Gola Secca, the police discovered what they called a chalet of horrors, a place where black masses were performed. There they found teeth, hair, skulls, black robes and candles, and images of the devil. It was thanks to Fabio's father, Michele, that the police were alerted to the other suspicious deaths. In the time since his son went missing, Michele hadn't given up hope. He searched for his son, visiting a devil's den of death metal clubs all across Europe, passing out leaflets and missing person posters in hopes that someone would know something. He quizzed Fabio's friends, including members of the Beasts of Satan. Many were evasive, and some even refused to speak to him. But Fabio's father wouldn't give up. He said this about what he discovered: "No one can contradict me when I say that heavy metal music and Satanism are closely linked. They go hand in hand and are inseparable. I say this without a shadow of a doubt." A police spokesperson said it was a strange story, but it was backed up with a convincing body of paperwork, which Michele had gathered over the past 6 years. A lawyer for the Beast of Satan argued that her client's propensity to listen to death metal music prompted the tragedy and implied that it was originally meant to be a game that they all played. These are the same guys who have severe problems, and they convinced themselves that they had the power to kill others. It was born as a game, but ended in tragedy. Andrea was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Nicola was given a life sentence. Mario, who had confessed to the killings, was cleared because he had played a secondary role. Andrea was released from prison in 2020 at the height of the COVID pandemic. He had served 16 years of his 20-year sentence and has since converted to Christianity. 2 years after the arrests and imprisonment of the Beast of Satan, the Italian police force created what they called the Satan Squad to investigate the growing number of threats of Satanism. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Ritual Rewind. I'm looking to grow this podcast, so if you like it, please rate it and review it. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, give it a like, comment, and share. And as always, you can interact with us at the Ritual Rewind on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.